Hey y'all, today we're going to do a Daiwa GS30. There were a few issues with this reel and it was pretty dirty, so I just cleaned everything up, did a modification I was going to make to it, and now I'm just going to show you how to break it down and service it and put it back together. Removing the drag knob just by unscrewing it. And I think we're going to start with the inside part of it, or let's start with the rotor. So to access the rotor, to take that off, we're going to unscrew this cap on this side so we can undo that screw over there. So while I do this, the issues with the reel were the drag was really weak on this. The cranking was a little off. You could feel like a little vibration happening when you're doing it. And that's just because the gears were kind of loose. There was a lot of play in there. Just pull that straight out after you unscrew it. And the line roller was pretty stiff. I think there might have been a couple more things, I can't remember. I apologize. Anyhow, I'm undoing these 3 screws here to open that side cover up so I can access the screw that's on the block. All the screws are the same size, so no need to worry about that. And now we want to get that all the way to the bottom so we can unscrew that screw there. Now all you have to do is just pull this straight up and you can pull that gear out along with the block and the crosswind gear. Under that crosswind gear there's a little plate, a metal plate that you can pull up as well. Anyhow, so let's go ahead and unscrew this nut so we can remove that rotor and work on that first. It's lefty loosey on this. And just pull straight up. Now let's go ahead and break down this assembly here. We're going to do this screw and that screw right there so we can remove the entire bail wire. And it doesn't really matter what side you start on. When you remove the screw here, you're going to see a cap on top of it. Just kind of covers it up. To pull that off, just simply lift up. And now we can undo this screw here so we can access that bail spring. And this was stuck in there. Okay, so for the line roller, we're just going to undo that screw there so we can pull it apart. And how it looks is we have that line, or that line roller screw with the washer on it. I'm going to leave the washer alone. You have that washer there and just a bushing inside this. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and just add some grease to this. Ooh. I'm going to grease inside this line roller. Just a little touch on the bushing inside there. I'm also going to grease the threads on this screw. And we can add some grease here. None on the inside really because you have that washer that's on the screw. So for the bail spring, we're going to add a little bit of grease right here where it was stuck. And also a little bit on the tip when we put it in. A little bit around that post. Some inside that channel. And definitely some inside that screw or that receiving hole for the screw. Kind of the same thing on the other side. Last thing we're going to grease is the washer right here. And now we can put that back together. Alright, so let's go ahead and stick the bushing on. And the line roller can go either way. It's the same on both ends. I'm going to stick that cap on there. And then just kind of balance this while I screw it in place. Don't tighten it all the way down yet. Alright, so let's stick in the bail wire. Like I said, I'm going to add some grease to these tips. When you're reinstalling this, it can go either side. And at this point, I want to put that cover on, but I'm not necessarily going to screw it all the way down yet. Okay, so for this bail arm, you're going to notice there's a little hole, receiving hole right there. That receiving hole is going to go over the top of that spring. I'm going to hold on to this plate try to keep that in place as I line those things up. I'm just going to kind of rock it this way to try to get the arch to set it in place. Now while I'm there, I'm going to hold both pieces together, even though this is really not going to shoot up on you, and I'm going to secure that cover. Now we can stick our cap on there and screw this in. And then for the other side, we're just going to add the screw again. Final step I guess we'll do here is add some oil to that pivot right there. And go ahead and snug that down also, this line rotor. Alright, so while we're here, let's go ahead and add some grease to certain points on here. Definitely that hole right there where the pinion gear is going to go through. And on top here where that plate sits. Alright, let me jump to the spool and show you what I did here. Before I get into that, I'm going to add some oil right here and then add a little bit of grease on top of it. Just kind of work that in. Then cover it with a little bit of grease. Now for the drag washers, to access those you need to stick a flathead screwdriver in, push in and up, and work it around to get that spring out of there. So the initial or original drag stack was sitting pretty low. So what I did was I had some pre-greased drag washers here that I just kind of modeled after the old drag washers and cut around it in almost a circle. So you can see it's not perfect, but it does the job. It makes the stack a little bit higher and it gives a better action for the drag. I'm going to oil that felt washer on the bottom because that was not greased. That's a little bit different and it was a little bit thicker. I was just using it because I had it laying around and it had it created the spacing that I wanted. So the orientation on this is you have that first drag washer on the bottom. So whatever you have may be different. Just note that if you have that metal washer, or that bronzy kind of washer, it goes in first. Then your keyed washer. Then your, I think there were 2 Teflon washers in there. Your aired washer, your aired metal washer. Your final drag washer, whatever it's going to be. And then your final keyed washer. To get this back in, if you look inside there, there's a little channel or a groove. I take one end of the spring, tilt it up like that, where the other end of the spring is above the spool, and then just kind of work it around my fingers. When you get it inside, just make sure you have it in the channel. The entire spring is inside there, and this is. Alright, so I'm going to do the handle. This was frozen, meaning this portion of it. It no longer is, so we're going to undo this and kind of grease all the inside of it. To do that, I'm just undoing the screw inside here. And then unscrewing this. I'm going to grease around here. And also those threads where it's going to, where that gold piece is going to go back onto. And if you're greasing threads, if you only want to put a little bit of grease on there, the most important part to put it on would be the top area, because that's where the screw starts, and I can work it down into the rest of the threads on that. I won't add any grease here, but I'm going to add some oil to this handle knob. Now we're going to just kind of work that in to make sure it's kind of working down into the shaft, so we have a free spinning shaft or free spinning knob. Now to put it back in, just kind of in reverse, you want that squared end or rectangular end on in that direction like this. That little circular end will be receiving this screw. I did not grease the threads inside there, so let me go ahead and grease the threads on this screw. The last thing will be to grease all this area inside here, where that's going to go inside that main gear, and a little bit on the top where that screw is going to go inside. Alright, so let's do the housing. We're going to remove the anti-reverse dog. We're essentially going to take this entire reel apart. Just kind of pull up on this. Now you have 3 screws to undo to remove the bearing cover. Those screws are all the same size as well. Just gonna pop that up. And that's how it looks. Okay, I'm also gonna remove the eccentric on this, so we do that by undoing that screw right at the bottom there. And you'll find that it might spring up on you. Don't get scared or concerned. But you can hold your finger over not this portion of it, but the bottom base part that's underneath it. The screw came out already, so let's go ahead and just pop this off. Under there you're gonna find, I don't know, maybe you find a washer, maybe you don't. This one actually had 2. Just push up on the eccentric, come straight out like that. I'm just gonna stick it right back in. But like I said, this one had 2 in there. Add some grease to the hole where that's going to go through. Same for the top portion. And while I'm here, I'm going to go ahead and grease some other places as well. One where that bearing, the pinion bearing, is going to sit. These holes where those screws go. And this dog screw right here, or where that screw for the dog is going to go. We'll do the rest in a sec. Alright, so if you broke this down and you needed to know how to put it back in, meaning the spring, you have to go in from the bottom up through, looking like that. I'm going to lightly grease all of this. Definitely some on the bottom here, because that has a tendency to collect water. And the bottom where that, or the hole where that screw goes into. Again, like I said, these spring starts with that curved end going from the bottom up, looking like that. And the way we're going to set this is, you're going to get to the hole, so it goes into it, but you're going to pull up to where it's just above it. The reason you want to do that is because you want to angle that screw over to the hole that it's supposed to go into. And you can usually do this by hand, but I'm going to set up with these tweezers here. Alright, so it's in that hole. I'm going to turn this as I push down gently, because I want to avoid that block right there. I want to keep that spring in front of that. Now I'm gonna hold down on it like I was doing earlier when I was removing the screw, and sticking our washers back on, and then just putting that lever on as well. Continue holding down on that as you screw this in. Now you can let it go. Alright, so now we're going to do the upper portion of this. This comes apart, and I'm going to just grease all around there, just the top part. And if you were to remove it, the thicker part goes up into this ratchet. I'm just going to lightly greasing all these areas. So I'm inside that hole for the dog. Then I'm also going to grease this pinion gear while I'm here. I'm going to grease the entire surface area of this pinion gear. and also the threads where that nut's going to ride on. So to reset it, we're simply going to pop this back in, and now we can stick the bearing on. Add some oil to that. Let's go ahead and grease this hole that it's going to go inside of, which is down here. Just drop it in and cover it up. Now this plate only goes on one way, and I forget how it is. I think it's like this. Either way, all you're going to do is just line it up. It only goes in one way, like I said. And then to secure up those 3 screws. Snug them down. And now we're going to put this dog onto this before we put it on the housing. It kind of looks just like that. Those 2 leaves just kind of straddle the ratchet. Kind of balance it a little bit. Then we're going to kind of find a channel for this to sit on, and then just drop it in. Notice I turned that eccentric to open. It just gives me a little more room to work with. Double check it to make sure it's working. And now for this inside of the housing, I'm going to grease inside this hole right here. That's where the bearing goes. Around there where that plate sits, grease the plate with our fingers and grease all these other portions of it. You can just kind of follow along. One thing for this, I want to do a little bit of decent amount of grease in that channel. For these older reels, even some new ones too, but for these older reels, I do put a little bit more grease than I might normally do on the newer ones. Because a lot of these gears and stuff are obsolete, or you just can't find them. This was stuck on there. That's what this was. So I had to do some work to get that off. Here's the shim I was telling you about that I added to the gear. There was just a lot of play in the gear, so, or there was some play in the gear, so it made the reel feel pretty awkward. Grease around there where it's going to go inside the bearing. Also a little bit on the back side and here as well, where it goes inside that other bearing. Now we could definitely add a little bit of grease to the channel, and if you did that, I would start from this end, just like that, not anymore by the other side, because the handle will be going in through there. But you can definitely do both, depending on how you, if you like to switch your handles back and forth. Okay, so the first thing we're going to put in is this bearing on this side, then add some oil to it. And the reason I did that is just so I don't forget to put it in, because that has to go in first. So now we're going to stick on our rotor. I'm going to hold on to the pinion gear down there like that, just so it doesn't move around. And just find the channel for it, and then we're just going to lock it in. Don't forget we have a keyed washer that sits over it. And we're going to snug that down pretty good. Okay, so now we can put on our plate right there, our crosswing. And let me go ahead and grease that ramp right there and over here as well. And you can stick on your block now if you wanted to, or you could wait. It still fits in under the gear when you put the gear in. Drop our gear in place. And now we're going to work on the shaft. The shaft I'm just going to grease kind of this area right here. As a matter of fact, I'm going to grease the entire shaft, but I'm definitely going to grease here where that goes inside the block, and the hole where the screw goes. Light amount of grease all around it. And the way this sits is that flat side will be facing up, going into the block. Like that. Then just secure it. Alright, so at this point, if you find the video useful, please hit that thumbs up button. I mean, it really helps me a lot. So I hope you guys do it if you're liking the video. Stick on this washer. That's the one that I added. I'm going to add some oil before I put this on and kind of work it in. Just going to drop that down. Now we're going to add a light amount of grease inside here. And some to the points where those screws are going to go into. Right there, there, and there. Cover it up and secure it with the 3 screws. Alright, so now at this point we can stick this, I forgot what you call this thing, but that inside. We'll call it the bushing. It's keyed, so you gotta find the groove to just slide it inside. On with our handle, and we're gonna secure this, and this is gonna be pretty snug. So when we get to the bottom, we're gonna kind of tighten that down pretty good. You don't want a lot of play in it. While we're here, let's go ahead and grease the outside of this. And then let's go ahead and put everything together just by putting that spool on and testing this reel out to make sure it's working fine. We have a washer on there. Sometimes that sticks up here. Either way, when you take the shaft out or take the spool off, you want to make sure that washer is either there or here somewhere so you can put it back on there. I'm going to test the drag first, even though I already did that when I changed these things. So essentially that drag was, the max was like this, where I could easily turn it. And now we're getting to where I have to use some force, and you can even lock that down to where it's pretty good. Yep, the sound of a nice old reel. Feels a lot better than it did before. Bail flip. Let's get this past it. Bail flip is good. Enough clearance there. The anti-reverse works. Disengage works. All good. Alright guys, thanks for watching. Again, don't forget to hit that thumbs up if you found the video useful. Consider subscribing to the channel if you like videos like this, and be sure to tell your friends about it as well. Thank you again. I'll see y'all next time.